coolant temp's good, oil pressure's good. Before we make a run, we observe.
Right on.
We're going to start our lock. We're going to proceed, and let's see what she'll do. Here we go. That sounded like a limiter to me.
It sounded like.
So I thought I had the last dyno pull video, and apparently I didn't get it. So the first two videos that you just saw was the first pull, second pull where we had dialed the timing all the way back to 28 degrees just to see where it would fall off. And this is the sheet from the fourth run, which I just didn't get the video on, so I apologize, but you can see the max numbers here. All right, she's tuned. I didn't shoot video because I really wanted to pay attention to what the tuner was teaching me, which was really valuable. So I did take video of the dyno runs. I'll insert that somewhere. And I'll give you pretty much the last one, which it really, he mapped it so close when he tuned it that it made basically the same power on the first dyno run that it did on the last. We played with some numbers in between. We upped the timing to 34 total, wide open, and didn't make any more power. Brought it back to 30, same power. As soon as we hit 28, we started losing power. So that's exactly expected. This motor should be in the 30 degree wide open throttle range, which is what Jeff always says with these. Smaller bore, less propagation time, you need less timing. So let's take a look at the numbers. Some of you have seen this already from my posts, but let's talk about what's going on here and why. So we made 175 foot-pounds of torque. We actually had one run where we made 180, but whatever, close enough. All that in at about $4,000, which, you know, inline six, right? Great rod angle, rod crank relationship angle. Makes lots of torque. Right around 4,800, we made 150 wheel horsepower. We'll use 30% just based on the torque converter. The stall of the torque converter, the rear gear, which is a 283 gear, and the fact that it's a C4, 25-30% would be a good number. That's going to put us right about 190, 195 horsepower at the crank. That's close to 1 horsepower per cubic inch, and naturally aspirated. That's what we would expect. You know, if we played with it more, we could probably eke another 10, 15 horsepower out of it. Although we have to consider there's a power steering pump on here that's good for 5-10 horsepower. The electric fan was running, so the alternator was you know, pulling a few ponies there too. You know, it's probably, you know, we're probably a good 200 at the crank. That's good. Let's take a look at the curve here. Very broad. That's because of the gear that's in it. The 283 is just not going to peak its horsepower. It's going to have a nice long broad curve to it. Some of that's the camshaft. This cam is a pretty broad curve to it. But for a driver, this is what we want to see. So we don't want a big steep peak. You know, that gives you burnouts and cool stuff, but that's not what this car is for. It being about 150, that's close to double what this thing would have been from the factory at the wheels. I think these things were about 80 at the wheels, so we're just shy of doubled the horsepower out of it. Let me talk a little bit about what Ishmael, he's the tuner at Westech. I took it to Westech, by the way, which is probably the closest dyno tuner to me. Here in Southern California. Westech is sort of famous in a way for those of you who watch Engine Masters. I actually don't, so I don't know all the details, but those guys work with the Engine Masters guys. They do all the dyno and the tuning and stuff. And Ishmael does all the EFI tuning. He's good with basically every system out there that's aftermarket. He doesn't really play with the stock stuff. You know, they don't do any new late model stuff for legal reasons, but they do all this old school stuff, and modern multi-port snipers. He told me he does about, I don't know, I think he said 13, 15 snipers a month. He's really got it down to a science. Only tuner I've ever met that's like, he's like, hey, come on, sit in the car. We're going to do these dyno runs. We're going to tune this thing. He said, I want to show you everything. Because, he and I had a conversation, and he knew that I knew what was up. He knew that, I knew a lot about the system, and that, that I wasn't an amateur, but I'm not no expert by any means. And so he was more than happy to show me how he tunes things. And the first thing he said was, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off all of Holly's idle control. He said, that's not going to work for this thing. He said, there's not enough flexibility in it. He said, we'll turn it all off first. We'll get it tuned. And then he said, then we'll bring some of it in and we'll get it idling good. He said, we'll get it coming down to idle, return to idle good, because I was having all those problems with it. And, he sat there and he built the base map right in front of me, and he just told me exactly what he was doing. He said, I'm going to dial this right here. We're going to power break it right here so we can see what it's doing. He said, I'm going to put pockets of timing in places to, based on exactly what this setup is doing. And that's exactly what he did. And it turned out perfect. And we did, I think, 4 or 5 dyno runs. And then, he said, go out and drive it. He said, if there's any funkiness, let me know. And he dialed in all the cold start stuff and everything too, without it even being cold. And I fired it up the next morning, and everything was perfect. So anyways, yeah, no funkiness. I drove it an hour there. We beat the hell out of it on the dyno. And I thought for sure it was going to, I thought if it was going to grenade, it was going to do it on the dyno, and it didn't. We took it up to about 5,600. And then I drove it an hour home, and the C4, it's stock, other than the converter hung in there, the rear end held in there, it's stock. There's no holes in the block or anything. So anyways, it was a great experience, and I would go back to those guys in a heartbeat. I mean, the remote tune thing just isn't going to work. You got to see it and feel it. I told him, I said, yeah, I tried remote tuning. He said, you can't do that. He said, you got to see it. You got to feel it. You got to listen to what it's doing. He said, watch this. And he was dialing in the fuel map, and he'd put it in gear and hold it up at like 1,500 RPM. And he said, you see how it feels right there? And he'd dial the VE up or down in certain areas, and it would come right in and it would feel good. And he says, you can't do that remotely. And I have to agree with him. It was money well spent. It wasn't cheap. They're not a cheap date. But I highly recommend getting a professional tune, because the thing's just spot on now. So I'm very happy. I'm going to leave this alone from here on forward. Now that I'm happy with the way it's running, I'm playing with some other stuff. Now I rerouted this fuel line, because I never liked the way that after I put the 4-barrel throttle body on here and this linkage is in the way, I wanted to move this. So I did that yesterday, got that kind of moved over and cleaned up. I'm going to do probably a few things with the suspension. Maybe it handles great. It really drives down the road nice. I've been wanting to do the Shelby drop. I may do that. But it means I got to get it realigned. So, we'll see. For now, I'm probably just going to drive it. I'm really enjoying driving it. Like I said, I drove it an hour home on the freeways, 80 miles an hour. It looks like it's getting much better mileage now too. Acceleration enrichment, that was the other thing. Acceleration enrichment was way too rich. And he dialed it in just so quickly, and in a way, when he did it, I was like, well, that just makes sense. Why didn't I think of that? But these guys, they do it all day long, but really got to get an education from him on some things. So, lots of value there. But anyways, just want to do an update on it and show you the dyno run. Absolutely highly recommend getting a professional tune on a dyno from a professional tuner. If you're in Southern California, I can't recommend Westech more, just because, like I said, they didn't take it in the back and say, go away for 4 hours. He said, come on, sit down next to me. I want to show you this, and you can't get that anywhere anymore. A lot of these tuners have their secrets, and that's just not, that's not cool in my opinion. I'm more than happy to teach anybody things in my trade. So, anyways, it was all good stuff. So anyways, we'll wrap this up, and we might have some more videos coming in the future when I decide whatever my next move is going to be with this.